Welcome back, Blue Blood Rivalry faithful. You've tuned into the podcast that bleeds Duke and Carolina blue. I'm your host, Hassan Pinto, and we're diving deep into the heart of the most intense rivalry in college basketball. This week, the hardwood was crackling with stories. In Chapel Hill, the Tar Heels are on a tear. Fresh off of an 81-66 victory over UVA, UNC is proving they are forces to be reckoned with. Plus, we'll break down the significant moves in the front office, with Jim Tanner now at the helm as the GM of Tar Heel basketball, and Hubert Davis locked in until 2030. Can the resurgence continue over in Chapel Hill? Meanwhile, down on Tobacco Road, the Blue Devils are showing why they're ranked the number 2 team in the nation at 25-3. They're steamrolling the competition, and the question on everyone's mind, can anyone stop them? Ready, set, let's get into it. What's up, Will? What's up, Daryl? How are you doing?
Good, man. How are you guys?
Doing well, fellas. Good to see you again.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, I'm back from South Florida. Weather was amazing. Food was amazing. The visuals were amazing. And now I'm back to you guys. How you feel about that?
Sorry to let you down, man. Sorry for the
You didn't let me down. You look good, Will. It's Daryl. He's letting me down today.
Yeah,
I couldn't fit into that carry on, unfortunately, Hassan. So I was waiting for you to get back to hear some stories, brother. It's good to see you.
Oh, good to see you as well. In regard to the Duke Carolina rivalry, we want to start with Will. A lot of things going on at Chapel Hill. Can you kind of give us up to date with what's happening?
man. A lot has happened. A lot has happened. I love the GM. We finally did. They finally listened to us, Hassan. They finally listened to us. Bringing in Jim Tanner. He's a Carolina grad, but he's got a ton of experience. I think he'll do well for the program. They signed Hubert to an extension, much to the chagrin of a handful of Tar Heel fans on social media that I've seen. And then we got a 4-game win streak. It's a win streak if it's more than 2, right? So we got a 4-game heater going right now, and I think we're playing some of the best basketball we've played all season as a team. So things are on the up and up.
So Will, let's dive into this Jim Tanner guy. Let me tell you some of the guys he signed throughout his career. Do you know he signed Jesus?
He signed. I mean, he signed everybody. So
well, he signed Jesus Shuttleworth. You know who that is?
Jesus.
Now, AKA Ray Allen, Jesus Shuttleworth, right? And he signed Tim Duncan. He signed Hill, Dominique Wilkins, Vince Carter, Raymond Felton, Tyler Hansborough, Jared Allen, Desmond Bain, Jeremy Lin, Marvin Williams. I mean, this guy just off of Tim Duncan, Grant Hill, Ray Allen, Dominique Wilkins, Vince Carter, that could have been his career. I mean, that's probably $1 billion in contracts right there.
The dude knows basketball, man. The dude knows basketball.
Daryl, how are you feeling? How are you feeling about this Jim Tanner signing?
Hassan, I think you pretty much said it better than I could. If this were 1990s, early 2000s, I think the Jim Tanner signing would be like phenomenal. A lot of those names that you mentioned are great business people, right? And historical basketball figures. But most recently, I'm not sure that he's connected with some of the larger guys and some of the bigger superstars. I'm going to be interested in seeing how this pans out. He obviously knows basketball, like Will said. I don't want to discredit him in that regard, but maybe a little outdated. But we'll find out.
So Daryl, are you saying that this guy's a 90s, early 2000 guy that's had shown no success in recent years? Is that what you're telling me?
I won't say no success again. I don't want to discredit him, but like you said, I mean, he literally signed Jesus. I mean, come on, man. If we're talking about Jesus. I think that he obviously knows basketball. And Jared Allen, like you mentioned, Desmond Bain, those guys are still in the league, are still good basketball players. But when we're talking about the more prominent superstars, he's a little bit outdated in that regard as far as who he's connected to.
Yeah, but I think, these agents, they can hire a hot boy like yourself, Daryl, to go in the office to connect with these guys. I think the point is these agents know how the game is played. I think they know how to get guys out of college. I think Jim Tanner has just been in a situation where he's signed so many contracts throughout his career that he was chilling up until yesterday. What do you think, Will?
Yeah, I mean, it's he started his own agency in Tandem Sports, and I'm actually looking at their website right now, and I mean, they've kind of taken, they're not the Rich Pauls of the world or whatever representing the biggest names, but I feel like you're never going to be able to pry those guys away from the NBA, right? That spotlight's too big, the paycheck's too big, whatever. So I feel like a guy who in Jim Tanner, who, I mean, Carolina, as we all know, is kind of always kept it in the Carolina family. He graduated, I believe, in 1990 from Carolina, and he knows Carolina basketball. He knows how the university wants things done. And so that with his pedigree of bringing in some of the biggest names, regardless of the era of basketball that it was in, I think he's going to be the right fit for us moving forward in this kind of transition period for sure.
Well,
I definitely think he and Bill Belichick will get along very well.
Yeah, I think he's going to have to get along with what's his face? I can't think of the name right now. Michael Lombardi, more than he's going to have to get along with Bill Belichick, because if you can create a two-headed monster in the front office, so to speak, of those two guys who have a ton of NBA and NFL experience, I think that's going to be more valuable than just about anything else.
So here's my opinion. I've been all over this college transition years ago, and I think the biggest winner is Tandem Sports, and here's why. I think Tandem Sports isn't going away. I think Tandem Sports is going to go after these young, aspiring college kids. And I think Tandem Sports is going to use UNC basketball is to say, if you sign with us, here's what we can do for you all the way through UNC, right? So I think Jim Tanner is going to leave Tandem Sports. They're going to elevate another person into his position, and they're going to start constructing a kid's profile from the time he's 18 years old all the way through to the NBA. And they're going to start structuring packages and working in concert with UNC's NIL to create win-wins for Tandem Sports, UNC basketball, and ultimately Jim Tanner. And I like the deal because he's a UNC guy. I mean, he loves the university, and he has experience doing this. So just to kind of refute your assertion, Daryl, Jim Tanner has those young guys working for him, and he has those guys that are out in the field talking to those young folks. But real quick question, Will.
Yep.
Given his experience, let's talk about changes you think he's going to make to the program, because this is the story. This is what everybody wants to hear. And what do you think how he's going to handle player development, NIL, and overall sponsorship packaging for players?
Well, and I think his biggest Tandem's biggest strength isn't just the representation and the agents that they have. It's the marketing, the PR and digital advertising, community building. I think that you're exactly right. You hit the nail on the head there. And what their value comes in that these 18-year-old kids who are looking to build their brand, which is something all too well about, Haas, is going to be more valuable to these kids than anything else. And these guys in the transfer portal who have kind of started their basketball careers and had a little bit of success, or maybe have kind of fallen into a place where they're just in a rut at another school, can come in. And if we can keep them for a couple of years, I think in the age of the transfer portal, you've got to be able to hold on to guys and build some consistency within your program. And if we have a program and a guy like Tanner who can bring in the right staffing, the right recruiters, the right everything, because it's all about those other pieces. I mean, we've heard what Lombardi said in his interviews on McAfee and all that about bringing in the right guys, the guys who know the fit, know the coaching staff, and this, that, and the other. I think that's going to be huge. And then what it does is what you and I talked about before is it allows Hubert to coach. It lets the coaches coach, and that's going to be the biggest benefit to this whole thing, I think.
Do you think the coach and the GM are going to be interconnected? So this deal not only extends to Hubert's deal not only extends to himself, but do you think his contracting extension is totally related to Jim Tanner's acquisition?
I do. I do. The timing of it all. I mean, so if you look at Hubert, we already had him locked down through 27. Um, and the timing of that announcement, I know they agreed to an extension last summer, and then something happened. Is they finally signed the papers in December, and I guess they waited to announce it until right after they announced the Jim Tanner signing. Uh, or maybe it was the exact same time that they announced the Jim Tanner signing. I think that those two positions are gonna. We've heard Hubert ask for money. Tanner's going to be the one that negotiates that for him. Hopefully, we can figure something out. Hopefully, we can pull money out of thin air like the football program did, and then let's see the improvement, because I don't think that Hubert's going to have a very long leash if he's getting what he wanted and then still loses 10, 11 games a year.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Who works for who? Does Hubert work for Jim Tanner now, or does Jim Tanner work for Hubert Davis? Or
I think they both work for Bubba Cunningham. I think it's because Bubba is on the hot seat as well, right? I mean, he's the one who's negotiating all these deals and trying to convince the boosters and the donors that we need hundreds of millions of dollars to two athletic programs. And if it doesn't work out, I don't think nobody wants to throw money at a thing that isn't going to work. So I think they both work for Bubba, and then they kind of work in congruency with one another.
all right, so Daryl, let's talk about Duke basketball, and let's talk about young lady named Rachel Baker. She's the GM of Duke basketball. My question is, Daryl, why was Duke on the forefront of this? How did they get out in front of the NIL, make the changes that they needed to make to land a team that they have today? Talk to me, Daryl.
Well, Hassan, I think that Duke is more prepared, right? I think financially they're a little bit more prepared than obviously with it being a private institution. I think it's a little bit easier to get ahead of this thing. Also, Coach K's connection to USA basketball is super important. I think before he left the helm, obviously leaving it to John Shire, they saw this along with you, saw this college basketball, this NIL, all of this moving more into a more like a professional developmental type of situation where now you have to pay the guys to be able to build your brand, right? And in the past, it's always been about the brand. We've talked about this. It's always been about the emblem on the jersey, the university itself, the Jordan symbol, right? The Tar Heel tradition, the blue blood rivalry. All of that stuff's always been most important. But now we're moving away from that. And I think that we're in the age and the era where the players themselves are the brands. And they've built their own brand before they ever put on campus using YouTube and social media nowadays. And I think that Duke, like I said, with especially with Coach K and his connection to the NBA, his connection to USA basketball, I think they saw this coming from a mile away, and they were able to get ahead of this and somewhat be very innovative as far as the GM and NIL is concerned by bringing Rachel Baker onto the team. She's done a phenomenal job up to this point. This is one of the most talented Duke basketball teams that I think we've ever seen, especially in the modern era.
Okay, let's just talk about Rachel. Let's you know, I think her role is a little bit different than Jim Tanner's role. I think Rachel Baker is there just to specialize in NIL opportunities, partnerships, navigating opportunities for players. But I don't think she's there recruiting and setting up the team. I think she's really there to take her experience from the NBA, WNBA, and Nike to really structure the NIL so that that pitch that Shire is making to the players that he wants is ready, right? So, do you think that's going to be the same role with Jim Tanner, or do you think Jim Tanner is going to select the actual players that Hubert plays for, or do you still think Hubert is going to select the players he wants, and then Jim Tanner is going to go after those players? That's a question for you, Daryl.
Yeah, I think that Jim Tanner probably has a similar role to Rachel Baker, even though they come from different fields, right? Like you said, she's very connected. She spent I think 8 years with Nike, if I'm not mistaken. She had some NBA connections as well, but she she's doing a good job of staying behind the scenes, right? And just providing guidance maybe, but she doesn't have, I don't feel like she has a strong hand on who's selected. I feel like John Shire is, these are my guys, these are who I want. And she's doing the job of facilitating behind the scenes, which is great. It's phenomenal. I think Jim Tanner will be, have a similar role in how he handles both Bill Check and Hubert Davis. I think especially Hubert Davis is going to have to handpick his team because he knows what he wants, which honestly at this point has not looked great. If we're looking at just Hubert Davis recruiting Hubert Davis's players, which is what we're seeing now, as opposed to the last couple of years where the guys he's had, the 5th year, 6 year seniors that Roy Williams actually recruited were Roy Williams guys, quote unquote guys. But I think that to answer your question, I think that Jim Tanner's gonna have to take a similar back seat behind the scenes role to what Rachel Baker's doing and allow the coaches to uh, let him know, advise him on who they want, and then he goes to make it happen. I don't think he's going to have a strong hand on who's selected for the roles as far as players are concerned on these basketball and football teams.
Okay, so you think he's going to say, "Hey, here's target players. What guys do you want?" And then he does all the negotiations to get them there. Is that that's what you're saying?
Yeah, just making the coach's job a little easier, but also still giving the coach the autonomy of, who are your guys? Let me know who you want. Maybe to the effect of these are potential recruits, these are guys that I'm looking at, but the coach still has the ultimate decision of, well, these are the guys that I want, go make it happen.
Okay. Will,
Yeah.
do you think Hubert Davis's a contract extension was a band-aid because Hubert wasn't in a position of negotiation power, right? He really didn't have leverage in the negotiations based on, UNC is not going to make the NIT, they're not going to make the NCAA tournament unless, they win the conference tournament and they beat Duke at the end of the year. But do you think this was a cheaper way for Bubba to solve a problem because UNC is so invested on the football side and they didn't have the money to go bring in a Belichick and to bring in a coach that would make the UNC faithful happy? Would have cost him millions and millions of dollars over what he's paying Hubert. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't. That may be a little part of it. That may be a small part of it. But I think the biggest thing. I mean, if you look at Hubert and the way he's coached, we talked about it with Art Chansky a couple of weeks ago, where I mean Hubert's got a 640 winning percentage. Which I mean, would we like to see that number a little bit higher? Absolutely. But we spend all this time talking about how the playing field with Duke hasn't been level for 4 or 5 years. And I mean, we beat Duke two out of three times. Actually, I guess three. Yeah, two out of three times 2 years ago. We split last year. Or no, we beat them twice last year. Like we're still right there, neck and neck with Duke as a thing. And yeah, they may be a little bit better, more consistently. But I mean, if you look at the how the playing field hasn't been level, so to speak, for years now, I think if Hubert can do this with an unlevel playing field, and then if you can bring in a GM, throw money at the basketball program, we can start recruiting some of these guys. His recruiting classes haven't been terrible. You look at Drake Powell. I mean, even James Brown coming off the bench, he's a developmental piece. But Ian Jackson, and then we've got Wilson next season, and they've got a 5-star and 2 4-stars coming in next year as well. Like the guy can recruit. We just need him. I think where you see more of a level playing field is that scouting and recruiting team. And I think that Hubert is as good of an option as anybody right now if you do level the playing field.
Okay, so you're 17-11. You're on a 4-game win streak. Not too long ago, Will, we were talking 13-11. What are the reasons for this turnaround? Is it just that you're playing stinky teams and that are unranked, such as Syracuse, State, Virginia, Florida State, or is the team playing better?
I think the team's playing better. I mean, we're taking advantage of playing stinky teams, obviously. But that Florida State game, Florida State went out and shot 50% from beyond the arc, 54% for the game. Florida State's one of the 3 biggest teams in the entire country from a size standpoint, and we out-rebounded them by 14. We finally have guys stepping up, like our big guys that we've been talking about not playing all season. For the last 4 or 5 games, they've looked really, really damn good. You look at Jalen Withers. You look at Van Allen Lubin stepped up. It felt like in that State game, every time we turned around, he was throwing down another putback jam. So these guys that haven't done anything all season are finally stepping up. And then a guy like Caden Tyson, who's only coming in for 7-8 minutes, but he hit 2 big corner threes against State. Florida State, he missed both of his 3 points, but he still had 6 points I think he only had 3 shot attempts. So these guys have come in, and with our bigs playing better, they've been able to be more efficient from the guard standpoint as well. So I think it's a combination of both.
All right, Daryl.
I'd like to talk a lot of shit right now, but what I will say, in all seriousness, I think that Hubert inserting Drake Powell into the starting lineup, we've talked about this, that's an incredible move, and it's long overdue. But I think that that's been one of the biggest adjustments that they have made, and we recognize his talent and the need for him to be in the starting lineup 6 weeks ago. I think that is one of the biggest adjustments that I've seen from Hubert Davis. And sometimes that ego gets in the way, and it's like, it's too late. I should have made the decision, but it's a good thing that he made a decision right now, heading into March.
If you look at Drake Powell too, to compound off of what you just said, he's plus 56 in his last 4 games. Like that's insane. And I mean, yeah, should it have happened sooner? We've been talking about it all season, right? But
it should have happened from the start, and we said that it should have happened from the start. He's a 5-star prospect for a reason.
And what it does is it brings, I mean, you essentially you deepen your bench, right? Like if you've got 3 essentially starters or 2 starters coming off the bench as well. I mean, Florida State was the first. We had 6 guys in double figures. That's the first time since I think the Kansas game that we had 6 guys in double figures. So
it's also about just having your most talented players on the floor at the end of the day. And that's what they do with Drake Powell. He is, if he's not their most talented player, he's top 2.
100%. 100%.
Even more than that, man. Yeah, most talented, sure, but this team is filled with a bunch of role players, right? And so if you have guys coming in, the bigs suddenly look better when we add a little size and physicality. So these role players, basketball is as much mental as anything else. And if you have a guy like Drake Powell who adds some physicality right off the jump, then that helps everybody else out. Everybody else can fill their role.
Duke Carolina fans, download Duke Carolina, the Blue Blood Rivalry film on iTunes or Apple TV or wherever you get your VOD downloads.
Hey, Quinn, you know you my guy, right? I'm always pulling for you. Night, when you step on the court, I step on the court too. And we in it.
There's only two games that matter. It's the North Carolina game at Duke and the Duke game that's at North Carolina.
But when we wake up on game day, there's a knot in my stomach. We've been up since 6 a.m. this morning watching recorded Duke Carolina games.
I watched the Rivers shot
about 15 times.
Yeah.
Rivers on his own. Yes, at the buzzer.
We're here for the Duke game.
And it is 10 hours and 9 minutes till game time.
The Blue Devils win 85-84.
Nothing better than North Carolina and Duke. It is the best rivalry in all of college basketball. Hall of Fame coaches, great players, and usually so much at stake.
And that's it. Carolina's won it.
The fans have as much to do with the rivalry being great as the players and the coaches.
It's 5 hours before game time.
Well, there's no question that the rivalry is there every day in our community.
Can you imagine what it would be like around here if people didn't have it? It would be terrifying.
We are 30 minutes away from tip-off.
It's one of the most exciting events you can be a part of, and I still say it's not the biggest rivalry in college basketball. It's the biggest rivalry in all of sport, bar none.
It's game time!
Prepare for Duke and North Carolina to face off like never before. Blue Blood Rivalry 5K! 5K! Sign up one, sign up all. Students, families, alumni, locals, non-locals, everyone! And you don't even need to be from UNC or Duke, because we have a Party Crasher division. Party Crasher! Come state, Wake, UVA, anyone, and join the fun. Crash their party! But the real battle is between the Blue Devils and the Tar Heels! Before it's settled on the court, it'll be settled on the race course! But there's more! There will be a special basketball dribble division where each participant will travel the race course dribbling a basketball! Dribbling a basketball? Hell yeah! That's cool! So sign up now! Attention all racers, prepare for the event of a lifetime. The race course will most certainly decide a champion.
Okay, Daryl, Duke is 25-3. You've won your last 5 games by almost blowouts. Cal, 78-57. Stanford, 106-70. Virginia, 80-62. Illinois, 110-67. And last night, 97-60 against Miami. And you know what your last loss was, Daryl?
Clemson.
Clemson. And you know what the difference between them and those other teams?
Ranked.
Clemson is ranked.
I mean, Daryl, we knew we'd find a way to bring that back in, right?
Yeah. Clemson is ranked. Yeah. Okay? And you lost 77-71. This record looks phenomenal. The dunks look phenomenal. But could we be looking at a team that is untested? That's my question, Daryl.
No, absolutely not.
What do you mean, no?
We're not looking at a team that's untested, Hassan. We're also talking about a team that's played against Kentucky, Arizona, Kansas, Auburn.
And where did your three losses come from?
Listen.
Those
just
teams.
Because you let me say this. Because you lose close games does not mean that it was not a test. It is not. That doesn't nullify the fact that you've been through tough moments. Sometimes even in life, Hassan, you can agree with this. Your biggest battles, your biggest lessons are losses, right? And you learn from those to come back the next time for victory. So to say that they're untested is absolutely unfair. Now, did they lose to a veteran Clemson team? Am I concerned about veteran teams against a young Duke team? Absolutely. Very much a valid point. Do I think this team is untested? Hell no. I think this team is one of the most tested teams in the country, and
No,
probably
Daryl.
Really?
definitely
No,
the
Daryl.
most tested,
Yeah.
definitely the most tested team in the ACC.
Daryl, you've had a lot of questionable takes. That might be one of the most.
Yeah,
questionable.
they're the most tested team in the ACC because they don't have to play anybody. Like Carolina is 17-11, and they cannot move up in the rankings because they're not playing any quad one teams, right? Now I can take that same 17-11 and be in the SEC, and I'm getting quad one wins, and I'm going to make the tournament.
All I'm saying is, I feel like I'm not saying they've been tested in the ACC, fellas. I'm sorry if that's misunderstood here, misconstrued. But I do think their non-conference schedule was a solid test for them to be prepared for later in the season. Absolutely. I think those big games against veteran Kansas team, against really, really exceptional Auburn team. Obviously, the SEC teams themselves are the most tested teams in the country because they play each other, night in, night out. I get that. But I do believe that this Duke team is also a very tested team. They're a very prepared team. They even playing Illinois, who's a decent team in Madison Square Garden. And Joel Berry said it himself, turning it into a glorified practice is a test in itself. That's a big moment. We're talking Madison Square. I don't care who you lace up against in Madison Square Garden. It's a test. That's one of the most historic.
Remember when you said that beating up on Carolina really wasn't great? It felt good, but it really wasn't great because they weren't a good team. Carolina and Illinois have the exact same record this year. Illinois is not that good. Illinois is not what we were talking about 2 months ago when we were doing
record and talent, and that doesn't really align. I mean, there are teams that are 17-10 in the SEC who have the same record as a Carolina or an Illinois, who are much better teams. And just because they have the same record, their losses don't look the same. It doesn't mean that their talent is the same because they play in different conferences. I mean, the record doesn't tell me much, Will.
Anybody, though, is where I'm going with that.
Well, you should go on March 8th and tell me what happens when we see that.
I'm going. So there we go.
Okay, but here's the problem.
I hope you have a drink with you.
Here's the problem that I have, Daryl, and you need to listen.
I'm listening.
When I look back on the schedule for 24, Duke has 4 ranked teams on their schedule. 4. They have 3 losses. They've lost 75% of the games in the top 25. Will, am I imagining that?
So I'm looking at Duke's schedule because obviously I'm not a huge Duke fan. When did they play Auburn? When was that? November?
That was their own. That was their.
Was that in November?
Yes, but that was their only.
So Duke's only truly meaningful game that they've played against any opponent who's worth a damn since beginning of December is Clemson, and they took the L on that game. If you can't tell me, Daryl, that doesn't mean something. Yes, you guys were battle tested early. Nobody's going to argue with you there. So was Carolina. We were both battle tested early. But what you're doing now versus what you're doing back then, and yeah, you guys are beating the shit out of really bad teams, right? Really, really bad teams. But the one team that's good, you guys lost to. And
yeah, but it was a close game. I mean, those things happen. You're talking about a college team, a young team playing a veteran team at Clemson. Am I saying that?
So you keep saying veteran team, man. What's the last 5 national championships have all been won by teams that are veteran teams. The teams that make a run deep into the tournament are all veteran teams, right? So yeah, we can sit here and say Clemson was the veteran team and this and that and the other, but not playing a meaningful game means something.
I think playing an extremely close game at Clemson is also very important. They lost, sure, but I also think that loss is a good lesson. They need that loss. Winning that game, I don't think is as important as losing that game. I think that's a wake-up call for a Duke team to say, okay, yeah, you're good. You're a very good team. However, you still have some room to grow to be able to win a national championship. I think losing that game is way more important than if they won that game. If they won that game, they would have coasted for the rest of the ACC season and gone into the NCAA tournament thinking that they were the end all be all. And at the end of the day, they needed that loss to remind them that they still have some improvement and some growth and some things to just clean up a little bit. I mean, I don't think it was a bad loss.
Man, this
No,
Duke
I
team.
think Daryl. I don't think you're being honest, Daryl. I think the problem with this Duke team is I'm not sure they're battle tested. They're a good team. They've got a great bench. I'm just not sure they know how to win really tough games. The tough game that they do have in that top 4 teams that they did beat was the number 1 ranked team in the country, Auburn. But I feel like if that's on a neutral court, if that's in a tournament play, I feel like they lose that game because I really believe that Cameron represents an extra man on the court.
Haas, even more than that, man. I think the team that Auburn was back then versus what they are now is 2 completely different teams. You look at the way Auburn's playing, that Broom kids playing. That team's the best team in the country, hands down, bar none. And we weren't saying that in November when they played each other, right? So yes, they're good. You know both of these teams are talented, but you don't know how good these teams truly are. And I think
they were the number 2 team in the country when they played each other the first time. How were we not saying that?
Preseason rankings are stupid, right? Because I mean, how many times has Carolina been preseason number 9 or 7 or whatever? And yeah, I'm speaking from my own personal letdown and disappointment, but I think that, I mean, you can look on paper and see what a team is, but it's a long damn season. And if you talk about injuries and you talk about anything that can happen throughout the course of a season when you're dealing with 18, 19, 20-year-old kids, anything can happen, right? And
we were saying that we weren't saying that about them at the time, that they were the best team in the country.
I don't think they were the clear and definitive number 1 team in the country. My niece goes to Auburn. I've watched more, in all transparency, I've watched more Auburn basketball this year because of her than I have Duke basketball.
Which might be a problem.
I don't think
it is. Problem.
I'd rather watch a team that's truly battle tested.
Okay, Daryl, question. The last couple of games, have basically been blowouts, right? Can we agree on that? Yes or no, Daryl? All I need is a yes or no.
Yes.
Okay. Duke has gone to their bench. They've given guys a lot of time. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, it could be a good thing because now you're getting confidence in a bunch of guys. And for example, last night with Isaiah Evans, it's the Slim Reaper, right?
Yes, sir.
That might be a good thing for him. He looked like there wasn't a shot that didn't look good to him, right? And, to me, he's in another offense. I mean, I don't even know how many points that guy can put up. Is this a good thing that those guys are getting off the bench and getting some reps and getting to put buckets down?
Yeah, I think it's a twofold. It's a good thing, great thing for the tournament, for potential situational basketball where you've got to put Isaiah Evans in, or maybe somebody goes down, you got to put Isaiah Evans in, or Mason Gillis has to play a bigger role, Caleb Foster. I think that it's a big it's big for those guys with the potential of needing those guys moving forward this season. Also, I think that it's huge for somebody like Isaiah Evans to get those minutes for next season. And you don't want to see him enter the transfer portal. You don't want to see, like you said, you see this guy in another offense. You're absolutely right. He would be the leading scorer on most offenses in the country. He is a hell of a on the basket type of guy. He can shoot the 3, and we've seen it in spurts this season. But with all the talent that Duke has, we haven't seen it consistently. I think having Isaiah in there, having Isaiah Evans play big minutes, 26 minutes last night against Miami, big role against Illinois, scoring double-digit points as well. I think these games right now are critical for next season and bringing back a guy like Isaiah Evans and making sure that he knows he's going to be a big a big part of your team next season. He's going to play a big role in who your team is next season and making sure that he's there next season. I think that both of those things are critical this season, going into situational basketball late in the year, and also for next season, making sure we retain these players who are talented guys who just don't see the minutes or the shots the way they would anywhere else.
Okay, guys, we are 10 days out from the Duke Carolina, the blue blood rivalry. Will UNC has Miami, they have Virginia Tech, and then it's the blue blood rivalry game. My question to you is, let's assume UNC beats Miami, goes to Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, gets a win. With the signing of Jim Tanner, what is the outlook for the UNC fan base? Are they revived? Are they excited? Are they ready to roll? Are they ready to get into the Dean Dome and rock the Dean Dome? What do you think, Will?
I think so, man. I think so. We're finally playing some of the best basketball we've played all season. I think this team reminds me a lot of that 2022 season. That team was up and
2022.
down.
That was a pretty exciting basketball.
It was an exciting year, and I'm not making direct comparisons. But so if you look at the way that season unfolded, right? We lost to Duke by 20. We had 9 losses going into the last 6, 7, 8 games, whatever it was, and then we ended up winning 5. We ended up beating Duke by 13 in Cameron that year to close out the season, and then we made that amazing run in the tournament. And so I'm not saying right now the way it stands, I still think we need some help to get into the tournament, but it's all about momentum, right? And I think that if we can close out the season the way we did in 22, you know, the ceiling is the roof, right?
Oh my God, that's the worst statement.
It's the worst. It's so upsetting. It needs to go away. But
it's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, Will.
We had to throw that callback in there, man. But no, I mean it's all about momentum, right? All you can do is like Daryl said earlier, you beat the teams that are laid out in front of you, no matter how bad they are. And we're going out, we're playing some really good basketball right now, and the ACC is terrible. The ACC is trash. If you look at SMU is I think the 4th ranked team in the ACC right now, and they don't have a single win against a top. They're 0-20 against top quad 1 and quad 2 opponents, I think, or something crazy like that. I can't remember the stat. So I mean, all you got to do is get into the tournament, and anything can happen.
Okay, Daryl, we got to wrap up this show, and I want to get your final thoughts. UNC beats Miami, beats Virginia Tech on Saturday, March 8th at 6:30 p.m. Does UNC have a chance?
Is that the end of the question?
Yeah.
No. I think Jim Tanner's first order of business might be taking that contract back from Hubert after they see what Duke does to them on March
8th. Well, does UNC have a chance?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why? Because you're hopeful?
Wow. No, he also said that the first time around, he predicted they would win. So he said if they got a couple more rebounds, they would have lost by 10 instead of 17.
No, I'm saying I never said that. I just said there were things you could take in that game and run with for the rest of the season, man. If you go in and you out rebound the biggest team in the country on their home court, because you know Duke's getting Duke calls in Cameron, then that's something that's a positive, right? And y'all shot 65% for that game from the field. So I think that moving Drake to the starting lineup, having Vin Allen and having Jalen Washington and having Cadeau come off the bench at times and all that it makes guys play better, play bigger, and all that. And I think that this new scheme is I think that if Duke doesn't come out and run with that hot start that they had the last game, I think that we have a chance to win this game. That game was over 5 minutes into the game, right? Like, I don't see the game going the same way that it did the last time. And I think that, I mean, yeah, we have a chance. Absolutely. Am I saying we'll win? I don't know, but we have a chance.
Okay, Will, do you think, there's been nights that I've been in the Dean Dome, Duke, Carolina, and the Dean Dome is so far from a wine and cheese crowd on that day. For me, it's almost like a terror dome. It's almost like Roman gladiators walking in onto a basketball pitch, and they'd be surrounded by 22,000 crazy fans that all they want is the win. Do you think we can get that energy from the fans?
I do. I think that there's I mean, if you look at that state game, right, that snow game, I think that the energy was there. I think that at times in big games, that crowd's shown that they show up. And I think that with all of us having to hear about how Cooper Flegg is the second coming of the Lord and Savior himself and yada, yada, and all the other bullshit that ESPN's been pumping in our ears, I think that the crowd's going to be ready to come out firing. I mean, they're gonna bring the energy for sure.
Okay, Carolina. The crowd's gonna be there regardless. I think that you're right, Will. It was over in the first 5 minutes last game, and I think that it may take about a half. I think coming out in the second half, the game may be close, especially because of the crowd. But I just don't see. I just see a very, very large difference in the two teams that we're looking at. And we talked about how Duke hasn't played much competition, and I don't think Carolina's much better than the other teams in the ACC. I do think I think that they are probably the third best team in the ACC, but I don't think that's saying a lot this season.
So here are my thoughts. I think the UNC crowd has a responsibility for this team. And if that crowd shows up and that crowd energizes that team, and Hubert Davis motivates that team, and that team plays the hardest level of defense that they can possibly play, and every player that Hubert uses from the bench gives every maximum effort, I think UNC has a slight chance. But for them to win that game, I think they're going to have to play a perfect game. I think they're going to have to play more than perfect defense. And I think the crowd is going to have to help this team. And if that happens, we could have another Duke, Carolina upset, and the magic of the rivalry will continue. And that wraps up another episode of Blue Blood TV. Thanks to my boys Will, my boy Daryl, for their insights. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. Follow us on social media. We will return next week to break down all the latest news, games, and get prepared for the Blue Blood rivalry game, which historically has been won by 1 or 2 points. And I'm hoping that this game is competitive. Guys, thank you for your insights. Thank you for everything. And as we always say, what do we say, guys?
We out.
The Blue Blood TV podcast is available on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts. Remember, guys, these shows grow when you share them. So we have a great show here. Share them with all your friends. Make them aware of the Blue Blood TV podcast.